Germany. And remember, it's 10, 12 years ago when the front pages of the best informed newspapers and magazines were all covered by stories, Germany, the ill, the sick man of Europe. And now they're the strongest economy. So what does that tell you? That change to the positive is possible. And that, of course, you need specific situation playing to your strengths. But if you engage in reform, you can still deliver. And therefore, I'm not belonging to those who are trying to sing the sad songs of the end of Europe. At least Germany so far also showed us that change to the positive is possible. And if you look to the emergence of the newer member states like Poland and others, most of them are a success story. So there is really no need to be sad or pessimistic.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good conclusion. And I'm very happy that we end this panel with this optimistic tone. Unfortunately, because of the time constraint, I was informed by the organizers, we cannot take questions from the floor. We are going to have a short break, and then the next panel is already waiting. Thank you. Next speakers, yeah, maybe. Thank you very much. Let us thank our participants of the panel for the active discussion. Thank you.
There is indeed no break, so please do stay in the room. We have a very interesting presentation now. So I'd like to thank our speakers. A lot of big topics discussed, a lot of major issues facing Europe. Whether we can solve them all, that's a different question. But I'd like to move straight ahead and invite onto the stage, 1 second please, Professor Mike Rosenberg. It's impossible to have a 5-minute break, so we really can't. We have to go ahead. We have a very interesting presentation from Professor Rosenberg, and I'm sure you'll bring them all back in straight away.
Maybe I'll just wait till they all use the...
Don't worry.
Yeah? Okay. I don't need this, no? Yeah, that's good. Timer. You want me to try to get this back on time, or you want me to take the full 45 minutes? Good afternoon. I think some people have been running away. I don't know if I should wait for them to come back. My boss tells me I have to start right away, so I'll start right away. It's a pleasure to be here on the 3rd Congress of the Executive Club, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me. Mr. President, Mr. Chancellor, I'm also very honored to be here speaking to you and to, ladies and gentlemen, all of you. As you can tell by my accent, I grew up in the United States. I do have some Polish roots, though. My great-grandfather comes from a city called, I'll try to pronounce it correctly, Rzeszów, which is very difficult for me to pronounce. He and his family left in 1895. At the time, Rzeszów was part of Austria. Rzeszów then became part of Russia, and now it's very much a part of Poland. IESE Business School, the school I work in, which is based in Barcelona. We also have a campus in Madrid, New York City, and Brazil, and we do operations all around the world. We've also made an important commitment to Poland, and we've been running an advanced management program here for almost 10 years. I think some people have done the program, are in the room. Is anybody from the advanced management program here? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 10. Welcome, guys. It's good to see you. Let me talk a little bit about what I see as the 4 challenges facing Europe, which are very much similar to what was already raised by the panel. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I think are 3 scenarios for the future of Europe. And finally, I'll touch a little bit on Poland and how I can see Poland fitting into some of these scenarios. So if we look at any of the photos of any of the congresses or the summits that the politicians have, you see a lot of smiling faces. And Europe clearly has a lot of things which are right. However, there are tremendous tensions in Europe, some of which were discussed today. Tensions between the North and South, tensions between East and West, tensions between countries with high productivity and countries with very low productivity, tensions between the left and the right, and between these traditional political parties and the new ones which were mentioned before. I don't know if this thing's going to work. There we go. This is Podemos. Podemos is a party which was mentioned earlier in Spain. It's run by a university professor who's never been in office, never done really anything in public policy. They won 15% of the vote in the Andalusian elections a couple of weeks ago, and according to the polls I read today, they're at 27 or 28% in the national elections. In Italy, this was mentioned earlier, if this thing works, we've got Pepe Grillo. They have about 23% of the vote. And you have to ask yourself, if an untested professor and a television comedian can command that kind of respect, then there's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong in Europe, or at least in its political class. And the situation in Greece is just an example of that. Alexander Tsipras and his finance minister, the finance minister, Dr. Varoufakis, is actually an expert in game theory. I don't know if you all know this. His PhD thesis was on game theory. His writing is about game theory. Game theory is how people play games. And what do you think they were doing, Tsipras, in Moscow yesterday? The same time they've got the debt going on. They owe $450 million that they have to pay today, if I understand it correctly. Yeah? And he's now bringing up the idea of German repatriations, that Germany owes them $270 billion of debt, billion euros. And by the way, I'm going to go visit my friend Vladimir to see if he's got a deal for Greece. This is game theory, because as was said earlier, these people are elected by the people of Greece. They are waiting for Europe to blink. They are waiting for Europe to give them the money. And they're playing a game. But there is clearly something wrong about Europe. The title of this conference is How to Rebuild Europe's Power, but I agree that Europe is very strong. It's got the richest economy in the world, probably the highest standard of living, the best educated people, as the President said earlier. So Europe is already strong. The issue is it does face serious challenges. Tensions in Europe is one of them. Another one, the machine works, is pollution. In parts of Europe over the last 50 to 100 years, we have contaminated the air and the water to a degree which is untenable. I read someplace that 2.5 million of Poles suffer from respiratory disease due to air pollution here in Poland. This is not something that we can just wish away. Climate change is real, and while Europe has a relatively low climate footprint, it's about 8.2 or 8.3 tons per person in Europe, which is much less than the Americans, which will be less than the Chinese eventually. The fact of climate change, I do believe, is real. And if the world doesn't do something about it, that will impact Europe in many, many ways. A third issue is this whole issue of immigration and aging of the population, the demographics which were discussed earlier. And this is a double-sided coin. As I mentioned before, my grandfather came from what is now Poland. His wife's family comes from Belarusia. The other side of my family comes from Romania. But they're all Americans. If you live in the country for 5 years and you pledge allegiance to the flag, you become American. My question in Europe, however, is, are the sons and daughters of immigrants, can they become French, Spanish, Catalan, Norwegian? Zidane, the famous French player, even when he was the captain of the national team, people said he's Algerian, not French. Oh, he's got a French passport, but he's Algerian. And immigrants in Europe, and Poland is a very special case here because you have people from the Ukraine coming into Poland, and you have something like 2 million Poles outside of Poland. Yeah? But the question is, do people hold on to their identity so tightly because they are not accepted in society, or are they not accepted in society because they're holding on to their identity so tightly? I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that if Europe doesn't figure out some kind of a cultural architecture where everybody can fit, where we don't have the xenophobes, which are supposed to pop up here. Yeah. Immigrants fighting for rights, other people trying to say we don't need these immigrants. There won't be anybody to run the factories. There won't be anybody to pay the pensions. There won't be anybody to make Europe a vibrant place. So it's a coin which has two sides, and it has to be solved somehow. The fact that thousands of European kids are moving to Syria to fight with ISIS, with this screwed up ideology, which is anything but Islam, means that there's something deeply wrong about how we're educating these kids, how we're getting through to them, and what they feel is their future in Europe. Without immigration, I don't think Europe is going to work, but as it is today, I don't think it's working. The fourth challenge is geopolitical tension, which is all over the world. Yeah? In this part of the world, I'm not going to tell a group of Polish businessmen and politicians about the crisis in Ukraine. But it's serious. It's got to get solved somehow. If we look in other parts of the world, in the Middle East, it's not only ISIS, it's the civil wars in Syria and Libya. It's a complete collapse of society, and potentially, Foreign Policy magazine said this morning in their latest issue, that maybe what's going on in Yemen is the start of the Arab world war, Shia versus Sunni, which could engulf the whole region. Shimon Peres said in Davos that the threat to Arab countries is not Israel, it's Arab countries, which I think is accurate. If we look at Africa, the major war in the middle of Africa seems to be under control for now, but I don't think the